right. Hey guys, this is Stephen Blossom with Social Grain. I'm super excited about our interview today. I have the pleasure, I have the honor to talk with Uma, the founder of BreadEx, and her head baker, Neil. And what BreadEx is, and we'll talk through it a little bit more, but BreadEx is a unique type of subscription service. It's based out of Dallas-Fort Worth area. The reason that I'm super excited about this conversation is because what they specialize in is bread. So of course, everything that I'm doing with Social Grain is dealing with bread. I'm super passionate about bread, as you can see, based on everything that I put out there. So I'm very excited about this. And Uma's company, they specialize in various handmade breads, fresh loaves, authentic breads from around the world that are delivered right to your doorstep. So it's a very, very interesting concept. I think if you're in the DFW area, definitely try it out. I am very intrigued by how she came up with this and her story, and just talking to her and Neil, I know that you guys will be as well. So before I get too carried away, welcome Uma and Neil. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Hey Stephen, thank you for having
Thanks
us
for
here.
having me. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Can you guys, Uma, can you kind of talk to me about what is BreadEx since it's your baby, and what's kind of your vision behind BreadEx?
So we are in some, or in all sense of the word, the product of the pandemic. Not in a good way. I'm not, but then I do see that good things can come out of difficult situations. So BreadEx is an example of that. What we're trying to do, it correlates with the vision that you have at the Social Grain, bridging gaps, getting cultures, getting people an exposure into other cultures. And bread is so fundamental and so basic to each culture. So we are doing that through breads, connecting people with each other, with cultures, bridging barriers through breads. So essentially what we do at BreadEx is it's a subscription-based model. So you subscribe for a given period of time, maybe it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And then each week we we bake fresh artisanal breads from around the world. And each week you'll get a new bread from a new country and celebrate that culture.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So something that you mentioned, Uma, is that BreadEx was born during the pandemic. It's one of the pandemic babies. What struggles or challenges have you seen by one starting a company during the pandemic, but also just keeping it going?
Yes. So Neil, you can jump in whenever you want to come in. But I will start at the very beginning. March 2020, spring break. We are coming back from a vacation in our RV. I get an email when we connect. We didn't have connectivity, so it was good to be away from the world for some time. We came back. The moment I got signal, the first email I get is from a wedding that we were gonna do like 3 weeks later, and the email is that they are postponing the wedding to next year or sometime later. So that started. And then I was like, okay, then this whole COVID-19 is getting serious and getting closer. So I was like, okay, we get home, and one by one, the corporate orders start getting canceled, pushed out. All our catering orders get pushed out. And essentially, we don't have nothing much to look forward to.
Right.
We close our kitchen, and anyways, we are also scared. We don't know what this whole COVID is all about.
Scary.
It was scary. I have 2 sons, so we just huddled up. We stayed home. Wiping everything down. So that's how it started.
That's right.
And during that time, I always wanted to bake breads, but really didn't get the time to do that. And I was like, okay, while I'm home, why don't I try my hand at breads? And then, yeah, so and I think in some sense, I did, it was bleak, but there were things. I was happy that I was getting to spend some time with my family, that I wasn't able to. So I was looking at the positives that was coming out of it. And I think that that's what just kept us going, trying to see the good or the positive in what was happening around us.
Absolutely. That's a strong story. I mean, BreadEx was made out of need for you, right? But
Mhm.
you saw a need in the world as well.
Mhm.
That's big. And Neil, can you talk about kind of how your path interlapped with Uma's, and how you guys kind of joined up, and you got involved with this?
Sure, absolutely. So I also similarly got trapped by the pandemic, like all of us. I was actually in England the weekend they shut everything down here. So
Oh,
I,
wow.
was coming back that weekend anyway. Fortunately, made it back, but my plan had been to then, come home, go find a job. I had left my prior baking job to go study in England for a couple weeks. So obviously that wasn't going to happen. So then, over the course of 2020, I had to kind of re-evolve my view of things. At the time, I was living in Los Angeles, and various circumstances required that I leave that city. Financially, it's hard to make it there, especially as a baker.
Yeah.
So I had some friends in the Dallas area. I had been out here for a visit. I'd previously lived in Austin, so I was familiar with Texas vaguely, but I'd never really spent much time here. So on a whim, I kind of took the leap, moved out here. The whole time just kind of baking every day myself, ordering, pound after pound of flour for delivery, just kind of keeping myself sharp the best I could. So as things started to calm down around the end of last year, I was like, okay, this is a great time to go out and find a new place, somewhere that I can work, that I can learn and teach, and get to put my hands in some dough again, for real, because it's just such a cathartic thing. And after such a stressful year, like being able to have those moments where you just kind of go zen, and
Mm-hmm.
you're working with the dough, you're watching it, you're learning from it. I don't know, it's something special to me. So I started looking for jobs. I saw this post that jumped out at me. There were, a million posts to work at grocery stores or Panera or whatever, but that wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. So when I saw Uma's job post, I had to jump on it and, reach out to her, send my resume. And, fortunately it brought us together, and I have learned a ton about breads I had never seen or heard of before. And I've had the opportunity to make them. We're in an exciting phase right now where we're kind of going back to the drawing board and, getting all of our breads perfect, as perfect as they can possibly be, because it's been kind of a seat of your pants sort of thing. We've had our own staffing issues, at the end, it's tough to find people. And so that makes it hard to make a lot of quality bread for people as well. So we're getting back there, and I think we're on the upward swing, and this is like the beginning of our golden age,
Right. And Uma, something that I think is key in your journey is that your hiring and your sales are completely past the friends and family stage, right? Like there is no friends and family stage for you, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yes. So when we started, so I started baking bread. My family started eating that bread and enjoying that bread.
That's right.
But after a point, they could only eat so much. And with so much going on in the world, and everybody was still eating bread. So I suggested that why don't I make a little more bread and give it to our neighbors and friends, do contactless, wearing mask delivery. So that's how it started. My husband initially was like, don't get distracted with this. We were doing French desserts before this.
Right.
So it's like, don't get distracted by bread. Just like, it's okay if you do it as a hobby. But then, yeah, later, obviously, he got on board. And it's all started, I told you, Stephen, it started as a charity fundraiser.
Yeah.
Let's just bake bread, give it to neighbors, get some money. We were feeling helpless, right? So many people were impacted. So
Yeah.
how could we do something? So we tried to use that money towards like we donated it to an organization that was doing a lot of good for people who had gotten impacted. So yes, so we started. It was bread for all. Then it became BreadEx, and yes, it's been evolving ever since.
That's awesome. I like the name BreadEx too. You understand exactly what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. So yes, it's working, I think.
Yeah. Okay, good. So if you don't mind, Uma, if we can, I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of talk about your journey, your personal journey. Can you sort of tell me about your family's story and journey, if you can?
So I'm obviously an Indian person, and I lived and worked and studied in India. I come from a family of 4 daughters, so it's my parents and the 4 of us. And yeah, growing up, we it was always home cooked food. But I was third daughter in the family, so I was always the sous chef. It was never the chef.
That's right.
So I was always helping my mother or my sisters. And the family, the background that I have is we are as a family very academic focused. So like everything beyond academics was just a hobby, just an interest.
Right.
Nothing really that you would make a profession or out of. So that's what I did. I followed the path of what is expected. Went to the best school for undergrad. Then I did my MBA. Then I was working with Nokia. So followed the path as laid out, I should say. And then there was some personal circumstances. I went into depression, and that was the time I picked up baking. So it was very late in the game. 2012 is literally when I got my first oven. Before that, it was like make do oven or some sort of oven in India. So and then we moved to the US in 2012 again. Yes. So one thing led to the other, went back to corporate life, went back. So here I worked with Yahoo, and I kept going back to baking. It stuck on. It wouldn't leave me. And then between, the 2016, 2015, I had my second son. And I thought when he's 2 years old, by 2016, I'll figure out if I want to do something adventurous. But it was, 2016, I was like, we went to London, came back, and I was like, I don't see so many European pastries here. So next day, I quit my job, started Tartmalicious.
Wow.
So it's,
next day.
Wow. And for the longest time, so my parents were very supportive. They're my first unpaid labor. But for the longest time, they thought it was just a whim and it's going to die out, right? I'm going to go back to corporate world and do what regular people do. But I think, and I think, that's how it's evolved.
What do you think it was about baking that kept bringing you back?
So I think which is even more so in breads, it's scientific. It's like you have to be precise.
Yeah.
But also there is an art. You can't just follow a recipe and get it right. It doesn't work like that.
Absolutely.
This magic, right? You do something like Neil was saying, you have to dip your hands in flour and actually feel it. And so it's been a long time, and we've baked a lot of bread, but every single time the yeast kicks in, the dough rises and it bakes. It is magical.
It's magical.
It is every single time.
It
It's like,
is.
oh my goodness, it actually worked. It's actually proved. There's like real action happening right in front of your eyes.
And that's happening from almost the most basic ingredients, right? Like these tiny, tiny, tiny little grains. Like all of a sudden you see this thing rise. Like it is very magical.
Yes.
That's awesome. So Neil, if I can ask you, what brought you into baking bread when you did, over the years?
Sure. So I grew up mostly in Northern California. So bread, especially sourdough, was on the table every night,
Right.
like no matter what we're at. My parents were probably doing charcuterie platters well before they got Instagram famous, that's for sure. That's how I grew up eating. So it was always a part of my life. And, we were fortunate enough to be able to travel some when I was a kid. So spent some time in Europe and like learned about the smells and the sounds of, boulangeries, pâtisseries, the sorts of things that just now I smell fresh bread and it takes me back to Paris. It's like it was at the right age to kind of get ingrained in my brain for life. But it wasn't something that I did seriously at home. Like every now and again, it would be like, oh, make a loaf of bread, or at one point, one of my roommates had a bread maker, and it was like, okay, we'll make some bread, But it wasn't like an everyday sort of thing. So
Right.
I ended up spending just over 20 years in the financial services industry. And it was never satisfying. It was an accident. It wasn't a career, it was a job. So when I got to the point where I was able to just quit and walk away and decide what to do, that's what I did. So at that point, I took some time to just reflect, and I started thinking, okay, what do I really want to do in my next life? I've done this. It was fine. It paid the bills, but what do I want to do that I have a passion for? So it kept coming back to baking. Like, I would make list after list and start crossing things off, and there would be 2 or 3 things left that would carry over the next list. And that was always one of them.
That's right.
I knew, like, for years I had thought about going to culinary school, but I knew as I got older that not necessarily that I couldn't, but I didn't want to pull 16-hour shifts in an active restaurant floor,
Right.
So there's something about baking that can be, it happens at odd hours for sure, which is fine. You flex depending, but having the freedom to just, work on your own, it's very, you guys talked about the magic, but it's like the intersection of science and magic, right? Because everything in baking is very, very specific. And if you don't follow the formula, something will go wrong, And so
that's true.
I've
learned that the hard way.
I mean, it's true. And that's, it's invaluable to keep a log every time you bake something, just to make a note of what you did. And then you can go back later. If it worked, great. Now you can replicate it, right? If it didn't, now you can start working through the variables and what didn't work. Like, let me change one thing at a time and see, okay, did that make a difference? And that process, that iterative process was familiar to me from years in IT and project management.
That's right.
It made sense to my logical brain. But being able to hand somebody a fresh piece of bread and see the look on their face, like, put it all together, right? Like, without one, there's not the other. And so that's what really brought me to it. So when I made the decision to go to culinary school and to go to a baking and pastry program, I was about a month in when my chef asked me, what do you want to do with this? And I said, I think I want to do bread. And he said, well, I know some people, let me get you a job. So about 2 months into school, I was already working in a bakery, learning hands-on every day, 20 to 40 hours a week. So that really kind of solidified my passion for it. And I learned, okay, not only do I enjoy eating it and sniffing it and sharing it, but I enjoy making it, and I'm pretty good at it too. So, when you find that thing, you kind of have to, like, throw all caution out the window a little bit and just go for it. So that's how I ended up here today.
Good. Yeah, that's that's a very what's the word I'm looking for? Professional, detailed like journey, right? Because you're going not only you go into the IT type world, project manager type world, and it's like, okay, this is just an action. Like I'm just going through the motions at this point. Like I'm not passionate about this, you know. But then you find that thing that you are passionate about and you do it. You hook on to, you latch on, and you go. I think to me that feels like a very common theme among entrepreneurs in general. Like, right, is like I'm working, I graduate from college or I graduate from high school or whatever it may be, and I'm working towards this thing that they tell me I need to do, but whoever the they is, right? But then in the back of my mind, it's like, is this really what I'm passionate about? And that's the birth of small businesses, right? That's the birth of entrepreneurship. So I love it. I absolutely love it. That's a fantastic story. Um, Uma, if we can talk about kind of go back to what we were talking about before with your family, and you mentioned you were raised in India. Can you talk about any of the traditional breads that are in your culture, and probably how those breads have impacted you to kind of steer towards bread, and how you use that experience or that those memories, I guess, today in what you do now?
So India is all about food and homemade
fantastic
food.
too.
Oh yes. If you're happy, if there's a festival, it's about food. If you're sad, it's about food.
It's food.
Everything revolves around food. Yeah, it's so integral. And then we make fresh food every meal, not just every day. Every meal is baked from scratch, like cooked from scratch, including the breads. So every day we have mostly. So you would have seen naans of the world at restaurants, but that's not what we eat on a day-to-day basis. We eat something like a chapati, if you've heard, like flatbreads, unleavened flatbreads every day. And then depending on where in India you come from and what grain is grown there, you have differences in breads. Like the other day I was thinking about Indian breads, and I don't even think I have explored all of them. Like every day you come across something that is new, and that you, be it the grain or how they incorporate it, it's just like amazing. So yes, that's where I come from, and that's what I bring to my life at home. So we are experimenting with foods all the time, and I think that's what led us to BreadEx. And even before that, what I did with Tartalicious, and there was a brief thing when I started called Cakes and Such. It was essentially just experiencing probably familiar things, but in a different setting. So bread is so familiar, but if you get a Russian bread, if you get a Hawaiian roll, it's so different. It might have the same ingredients, but the experience, the context is very, very different.
Right.
So I think that's what keeps coming back, and I think it all comes together in the package of BreadEx. And yes, I think.
Yeah. I like what you said. Bread is familiar but different.
Yes.
It's an oxymoron, right? It's an oxymoron. Like
exactly.
Everybody eats bread, right? Everybody eats bread. But even within India, you mentioned the breads are different based on the grain that's grown and within the different regions. Like that right there is it's powerful to me, because bread is essentially made the same, for the most part across the world, but it tastes so different. It's so different. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Can you you mentioned chapati as one of the main or staple breads. How is chapati made, and can you describe that a little bit? Like what does it taste like? You mentioned flatbread, but what do you think of when you think of chapati?
It's the simplest of flatbreads. It's essentially just wheat flour, water, salt, maybe sometimes oil gets added. You roll it out, you bake it on a girdle, and yeah, you eat it hot and fresh. Put some ghee on top.
Oh,
And
okay.
yes, yes. So there are different ways how you can, like, small things. So if you, for example, cook it directly on fire,
Okay.
it becomes like a pita-like bread, unleavened though,
Okay. Got it.
which is soft and light.
Right.
If you you could make it into kind of like a puff pastry with layers.
Hmm.
If you put some fat in between the layers and create some layers, um, or just have it like, so they're simple variations, but then the end result is a little different and
Right.
interesting.
Right.
And then, like, sourdough, you can have inclusions, right? So
Yes.
we have parathas, so you have
Right.
different stuffings that go in. It can
Right.
be a potato filling or a cottage cheese filling. So that itself makes so much of a difference.
Okay. Okay. That's good
So,
to know. I'll have to I'm gonna try my hand at it one day and
mhm,
let you know how
mhm.
it goes.
Yes, it's super simple. Or maybe I have seen it from childhood, because rolling it out and having it as a round, which is even all across, is in itself a challenge. But then,
Right.
yeah, you get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Um, and I guess sticking to that same theme from even like you started to talk about childhood, what kind of memories are sparked would you think of something as simple as bread or a chapati or whatever kind of bread it may be?
uh let's see. Oh, one thing, so like I said, I'm the third daughter, so I've always been the sous chef. So I've observed my mom or my sisters do it before I jump into it. So the first time I made the dough, I remember my mom telling me it was perfect, like the hydration, like in terms of bread, the hydration was perfect and everything. But it was also because I had seen it so many times, and my sister had told me what works for her and what doesn't. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, so we have obviously not superstitions but folklores. Like,
Right.
if you make your chapatis round, your husband's gonna love you. Or if it if it's consistent all throughout, things like that. So
Yeah.
me and my sister, so if you're making it together, one person will be rolling it out, one person would be um, like making it. So we'll fight as to, like, she intentionally didn't
Right.
make it right because she
Right.
doesn't want my husband to love me or whatever.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah, so it was like, and then parathas are supposed to be triangular and not round, but
Right.
some people,
Okay.
and the thickness. So small little things, but yeah, it's so close to you that every little thing takes you like Neil mentioned, like the
Yes.
smell of bread. So the smell of fresh rotis with ghee on top, that aroma, like, just
Yes.
gets you to the table, right? Immediately, and
Absolutely.
takes you back to your childhood. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And you don't know it at the time. Well, obviously when you're a child, you don't
yeah.
realize it until you get older and you start thinking about it. And it's
Mhm.
like I remember sitting around the dinner table with our entire family, and there's a thing of some type of bread in the middle of the table,
Mhm.
right? And everybody
Yes.
trying to get the best piece. Like I remember that now. Like you don't think
Yes.
about that, but that's very true. It's very true. I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yes.
Um, Neil, we'll start wrapping up pretty soon. But Neil, from your perspective, and you sort of mentioned something that I thought was super interesting earlier, where you mentioned a baking log. It's super simple, but right, it's interesting. Like a lot of people probably don't think to do that. Besides that, what other tips or I guess yeah, tips, suggestions, anything like that would you give to someone that's looking to grow their baking expertise or kind of even get into baking, even just start baking bread specifically?
I mean, first and most important, don't get frustrated, because it can be very frustrating, and
Kid.
something you really want to do, like, you're not going to succeed the very first time every time. You might get lucky. You might make the most beautiful loaf of bread ever your first time out, but that second one's going to be a doozy. Like, you have to be prepared for the letdown.
That's right.
But at the same time, like, each one of those is a learning experience. And so using a log, taking notes, but not only that, as bakers, we stand on the shoulders of the bakers that have come before us for thousands of years.
Right.
There's so much knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. And as Uma made reference to, like, everything is just a variation on a theme, right? With those 4 basic ingredients, flour, water, salt, yeast, you can make any leavened bread in the world. You take out the yeast, you can make any unleavened bread.
That's right.
If you use wild yeast, which most of us just call sourdough, there's another variation, but they're all at the heart very simple, meant to be easy. So while it's important to take it seriously, if you want, especially, if you're trying to build a business as a baker, I think it's important to take it seriously, but there's, there has to be an aspect of fun and of play as well. And that's where the experimentation comes in. That's where, looking for, let's say you want to make the perfect brioche and you've got a million cookbooks on your shelf and each one of them has a slightly different brioche. Start to look through, start to find the similarities, start to see the roots of where they're coming from, and then build your own formula on top of that and see what happens, and maybe it'll be a failure and you go back and you say, okay, did I do something wrong, or is it just like this combination doesn't work? So again, that iterative process that, is really important. Learning from others, sharing your knowledge is also a great way. Once you do get that perfect loaf and you can replicate it every time, teach other people how to do it. Share your recipe, show your techniques, help them understand. I've always found that, teaching people only helps reinforce the knowledge that I already have, right? Like I might know it in the back of my head, but until I try to explain it to somebody and show it to somebody that's never done it before, do I truly understand it?
Absolutely.
So I think those are both extremely valuable, and ultimately it should be a pleasurable experience. It shouldn't, if it's something you're passionate about, if it's something like, there's the cliched adage of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, baking is really hard work. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like there are days when it's 100 degrees outside and it's like 400 inside because I'm standing in front of the ovens, and that's not very much fun, but you do it because you love it, right? And you push through those hard times and you drink extra water, because it's important to me that when I give somebody that final product, that it makes them happy.
Absolutely.
That's really what I'm doing it for.
And that's the magic right there, is making them happy.
Exactly.
Seeing that look on their face. And Uma, same question for you. Whether it's tips on baking bread, or even just starting a business, or just anything, any tip that you would want to share with anybody that's trying to follow a very similar journey as yourself?
What should I say? I think what has worked for me, I have wanted to give up like hundreds of times. But then if you can get up the next day and be passionate about it, or see a sliver of the silver lining, I think that's what keeps us going. And then, like Neil said, it applies to business, to life, to anything that you do. Find pleasure in doing what you're doing. Otherwise, very soon you will give up, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's what it is. Enjoy what you're doing and put in 200%, and then keep learning, and hopefully things will work out.
That's right. Powerful words. I love it.
Oh, no, not powerful at all. But I think I have lived through this.
That's right.
That's worked for me.
Yes.
It
makes sense though. Those are very relatable tips, both of them, I think, from what you guys said. So I definitely appreciate that.
I've got one more quick one.
Yeah.
Don't try to eat everything you bake.
You definitely have to try.
You have to try, but like I think I learned really quickly, trying is like cutting myself a slice and the rest of the loaf goes to somebody else, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
don't eat everything you bake.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Good. Well, I appreciate the time, Neil, Uma. It's definitely been a pleasure speaking with you. Um, I couldn't have asked for a better interview. I couldn't have asked for better interviewees. And I'm sure that the folks that are watching this will say the same. Hearing about your journeys, your passions, bread, some of the history behind some of the breads that you guys are involved in. It's definitely been a fantastic opportunity to speak with you. Before we go, is there any type of website or social media or anything that you want everybody to know about?
So right now, as we speak, we are, so like I said, so we used to have Tartalicious, and
Right.
BreadEx just popped up last year. And now we are in the process of rebranding and relaunching as BreadEx. So our social media handles will change, our website will change.
Gotcha.
But for now, it is www.tartalicious.com. It will move to an easier website, which will be www.breadex.com, BREADEX.com. And then our social media handles would be similar. It will be BreadEx, the BreadEx Bakery or BreadEx DFW. So yes, so I will keep updating. So when we have our BreadEx website and social media handles, I'll pass that on to you.
Perfect. I'll make sure I share with everybody. All right, guys. Well, thank you for the time. For all the folks watching and listening, thank you for watching and listening. And hopefully we hear from everybody soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thank you.